cold air bit at my skin as I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, walking through the almost deserted Walmart parking lot. The drizzle from earlier had left the ground slick, and the parking lot glistened under the dim, flickering streetlights. The wind tugged at the abandoned shopping carts, making them rattle and creak as they scraped across the wet asphalt. The lot felt eerily empty, and the silence was broken only by the occasional sound of the tires on the wet pavement and the soft hum of distant traffic from the highway. It wasn't late, just a little after 10 p.m., but the weather had driven most people inside, leaving the parking lot unusually quiet. It was the kind of night where you could almost hear the stillness pressing in from all sides. The lights overhead flickered, casting long shadows over the wet ground, and for some reason, it made me feel like I wasn't alone out there. The kind of feeling that sits in your stomach and lingers, gnawing at you. I'd been excited to pick up a few ingredients for a new pasta dish I wanted to try. Cooking is my escape. When I'm in the kitchen, I don't think about anything else. Just the rhythm of chopping, stirring, and tasting. It's the one thing that always calms me, and after a long day, it was exactly what I needed. As I walked towards my car, grocery bag in hand, I felt an odd sense of unease. I tried to ignore it, blaming it on the cold, or maybe just the emptiness of the night. But there was something about the parking lot that felt off. The air was thick with a stillness that seemed almost unnatural. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, but I shook it off, telling myself it was just paranoia. Then, out of nowhere, she appeared. A woman stepped into my path, emerging from between two parked cars. She was moving quickly, almost as though she'd been waiting for me. Her clothes were disheveled, her hair sticking to her face from the rain, and she looked terrified. Her eyes were wide with panic, darting around as if she was trying to keep track of something, or someone. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to do. She looked out of place, out of breath, and her eyes were full of fear. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "Please," she gasped, her voice shaking. "I need your help." I took a step back, instinctively keeping my distance. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice wary, though I was trying to stay calm. My heart rate was picking up, and I could feel my muscles tense. She stopped, her eyes flicking nervously around the parking lot. "A man's been following me. He's been watching me for hours. I don't know what to do. Please, I need help." Her words came out in a rush, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She clutched her coat tightly, as if holding on to it would somehow keep her safe. The fear in her eyes was real, and it made my chest tighten. I could see she was genuinely terrified, but at the same time, there was something about the whole situation that didn't feel right. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The parking lot was nearly empty. There was no one else around. My mind raced, going through the possibilities. Could she be telling the truth? Or was this some sort of setup? I couldn't make sense of it, but my gut was telling me to be cautious. I began, but I didn't know what to say. I had to make a decision. Just as I was about to tell her I would call the police, I noticed something strange. The woman's expression shifted. It wasn't gradual, more like someone flipped a switch. The panic that had consumed her just seconds ago seemed to evaporate. Her eyes, which had been wide with fear, narrowed as she looked at me, almost coldly. "Don't worry," she said, her voice now unnervingly calm. "You should have stayed inside." I blinked, unsure of what had just happened. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked almost relieved. And that's when I heard it. A loud slam of a van door opening, followed by the sound of footsteps coming from behind me. I turned just in time to see three men stepping out of the darkened van, their figures shadowy and indistinct at first. The way they moved, quick, purposeful, made my blood run cold. I recognized the look in their eyes, even in the darkness. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something more sinister. They were coming for me. Before I had a chance to react, one of the men made a beeline toward me, and I knew then that this wasn't some random encounter. This was a setup. In a split second, I made my move. I turned, bolting for my car. My heart was racing, my hands fumbling as I tried to unlock the door. I could hear footsteps behind me, the sound of someone getting closer. Too close. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel the man's presence right there, just inches away. I yanked the door open, scrambled into the seat, and slammed it shut. My hands shook as I grabbed the keys, shoved them into the ignition, and started the engine with a roar. The van was already in motion, the men closing in on my car. One of them reached for the door handle, but I slammed my foot on the gas just in time. The tires screeched as I sped out of the parking lot, adrenaline flooding my veins. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. In the rearview mirror, I saw the van still sitting there, the three men standing in the parking lot, their eyes fixed on me as I drove away. It was like they were waiting for someone else, another victim to fall into their trap. I don't know what would have happened if I had hesitated for just a second longer, if I had let them get any closer. But the fear that gripped me in that moment, the realization that I had narrowly avoided something much worse, didn't leave me for a long time. I don't know if the woman was in on it, or if she was also a victim. Maybe she was just part of the ruse. But I wasn't going to stick around to find out. The rest of the night felt like a blur. I didn't sleep. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just escaped something horrible. And every time I drive past that Walmart now, my eyes are glued to the parking lot, wondering if those same men are still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross their path. It was a chilly autumn night, the kind that makes you want to bury your hands deep in your pockets and pull your hoodie tight around your shoulders. The breeze rustled the fallen leaves, sending them skittering across the pavement like whispers in the dark. The sky was overcast, the clouds thick and heavy, blotting out the stars. A light drizzle had soaked the streets earlier, but now the rain had tapered off, leaving a damp chill in the air. The dim glow from distant streetlights barely cut through the thick veil of darkness that hung over the quiet suburban streets. The night was unusually still. No traffic, no sounds of distant chatter. Nothing but the rustling of leaves and the occasional hum of a car passing on the road, far off in the distance. It was the kind of night that made everything feel a little too quiet, a little too empty. I had just finished up at Walmart, my usual late-night run to pick up the new RPG that had dropped that day, along with a few snacks to keep me going through my marathon gaming sessions. I didn't mind the walk home. My apartment was only a few blocks away, and the cool night air was actually refreshing after the warmth of the store. I always enjoyed walking at night. It gave me time to clear my head, time to just think without the world buzzing around me. But tonight, something felt off. The streetlights along the main road were flickering as I made my way down the sidewalk, casting long, jagged shadows across the wet ground. The quiet was suffocating. The occasional car passed by, its headlights cutting through the darkness, but otherwise, there was nothing. Just the soft sound of my footsteps and the rustle of the trees in the distance. I didn't want to walk the long way around, so I decided to take my usual shortcut. It wasn't much of a path, just a narrow dirt trail that cut through the woods. It was overgrown, rarely used, but it shaved a few minutes off my walk and made the whole trip feel like more of an adventure. I'd taken this path countless times before, never thinking twice about it. But tonight, the trees seemed to loom a little larger, the shadows a little deeper. The path felt more secluded, more silent. I pulled my hoodie tighter as I stepped onto the dirt trail, the damp earth squishing beneath my boots. The trees were thick, their branches hanging low, creating a canopy that blocked out most of the weak light from the street lamps. The path was lined with tall bushes and tangled vines that seemed to twist around each other, as if trying to hold me in. There was something unsettling about the way the night felt here, like the world beyond the trees didn't quite reach this place, like I was walking through a forgotten part of the world. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. It was just a few minutes down the path, just a shortcut, nothing to worry about. But then, I heard it. At first, it was faint. So faint I almost thought I was imagining it. A soft sound, like a child crying. The sobbing wasn't loud, but it was distinct. It cut through the stillness of the night, like a crack in the atmosphere, sending a chill up my spine. My first instinct was to stop and listen. I strained my ears, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. I glanced around. The trees were thick here, and the bushes were so dense that I couldn't see much beyond the immediate area. The crying seemed to be coming from deeper in the woods, beyond the path where the shadows swallowed everything. A child. Crying. Out here? Alone? I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My mind started racing. A lost child, maybe? Should I go check it out? But why would a child be out here, so late, in the middle of the woods? I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. I shined it ahead, but all I saw were thick branches and tangled vines. The light barely reached far enough to illuminate anything beyond a few feet. The crying had stopped, but the air felt heavier now. The silence that followed was almost worse than the crying itself. I felt the instinct to leave, to turn around and head back to the main road. But something kept me standing there. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was just the way the night felt. But I found myself stepping forward, slowly, cautiously, toward the source of the sound. Just as I took another step, the crying started again. Louder this time. Closer. My heart skipped a beat. I stopped dead in my tracks, frozen. I listened carefully, but it was still faint. Where was it coming from? The noise seemed to be bouncing off the trees, echoing in all directions, and then it stopped again. Complete silence. The kind of silence that presses on your ears, makes everything feel too quiet. A few moments passed before the sound of giggling cut through the silence. Not a child's giggle. It wasn't innocent. It was cold, hollow, and the way it echoed through the trees made my skin crawl. The giggle seemed to stretch, like it was coming from all around me, bouncing off the trees and wrapping around me. My stomach tightened, and I could feel a knot forming in my chest. The weight of the air around me thickened, like I was being watched. I shone the flashlight in every direction, my hands trembling. Nothing. Just trees. Just bushes. The light barely cut through the thick darkness, revealing nothing but shadows and thick underbrush. And then it happened. A scream. A sudden, sharp scream. One that wasn't human. It was raw, full of pain, full of terror. It didn't sound like anything I had ever heard before. It shattered the silence and rattled my bones. The scream seemed to reverberate through the trees, and before I even realized what was happening, my feet were moving. I didn't think. I just ran. I ran faster than I ever had, my heart thundering in my chest. The path was twisting in front of me. The trees seemed to close in, but I didn't dare slow down. I could hear the rustling of the leaves behind me, feel the air getting heavier with every breath. Every step I took was harder, faster, as if the ground beneath me was pulling me back, holding me in place. I didn't stop until I hit the main road. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I could see the lights from the houses in the distance. Panting, my legs shaking, I made it to my apartment, locked the door behind me, and collapsed onto my couch. My mind was racing, but I couldn't make sense of anything. What had happened? What was out there? I called the police. I told them everything. The crying, the giggle, the scream. But when they went to search the woods, they found nothing. No child. No footprints. No sign that anyone had been out there at all. The next day, I overheard some of the neighbors talking. They mentioned the sounds too. The same strange noises, the same unsettling cries and laughter, heard by others who had taken that path. Apparently, it wasn't the first time someone had reported hearing those sounds. I don't know what I heard that night, or who, or what, was making those noises. It was a cold autumn night, the kind where the chill in the air settles into your bones. The sky was overcast, with thick clouds blotting out the stars, and a light drizzle coated the parking lot in a thin layer of moisture. The dim streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the wet asphalt, making everything feel a little more eerie than it should. The sound of rustling leaves was carried on the breeze, punctuated only by the occasional car driving by, breaking the stillness in a way that almost made the silence more pronounced. I was finishing up my shift at Walmart, just a regular closing night shift. Nothing out of the ordinary. As usual, I spent the last half hour organizing shelves, wiping down counters, and handling the last-minute cleanup before I clocked out. I had always liked the calm of the late-night shifts. It was quiet, empty, and I could keep to myself, which suited me just fine. I wasn't much for conversation, but tonight was different. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed him. A man wandering the aisles, moving aimlessly from one end to the other. He didn't have a cart, and he wasn't picking anything up. He was just walking, as though he was looking for something but never finding it. He didn't seem to be shopping at all. He was wearing a dark jacket, hood up, his face obscured by the shadows. And every time I glanced in his direction, he was there, still moving. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he was just another late-night shopper, or maybe he had just gotten lost. But then, it started to feel strange. I continued working, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. It was probably just my imagination, nothing more than a coincidence. But after a few minutes, I noticed that every time I moved to a different section of the store, he appeared in my peripheral vision, always within a few aisles of me, never picking up anything, always just walking. At this point, I couldn't shake the unease that was creeping into my chest. I didn't know why, but it felt like I was being watched. And the worst part was that there was no clear reason why. He wasn't doing anything overtly suspicious, but it felt wrong. As the store prepared to close, I clocked out and grabbed my bag. The lights dimmed as the store began its closing routine, and I headed toward the exit. I took a deep breath as I stepped outside into the night, trying to shake off the odd feeling that had been building up. The rain had stopped, but the dampness in the air clung to everything, making the cold feel more intense. It was quiet now, with only a few cars left in the parking lot. But as I approached my car, my body tensed. There he was, the same man. He was standing near the far end of the lot, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his gaze fixed straight ahead, staring at nothing in particular. I paused for a second, unsure of what to do. I had no reason to approach him or to engage, but the way he stood there, unmoving, made me feel like something was off. He didn't acknowledge me. He didn't move. He just stood there, as if he was waiting for something, or for someone. A quick flash of unease ran through me, and I realized I was trying to avoid eye contact, instinctively looking down at my phone. My heart rate picked up, but I told myself I was just being paranoid. I couldn't let myself get wrapped up in it. This was just another normal night, right? I quickly changed direction, pretending to check my phone and walking a little further around the car. But I kept glancing at him out of the corner of my eye. He hadn't moved. He was still standing there, staring, not acknowledging my presence at all. It felt deliberate, and it unsettled me even more. I didn't want to linger. I wasn't about to stand there for any longer than I had to. I unlocked my car door, jumped in, and slammed it shut, my hands shaking slightly as I started the engine. The low rumble of the car's engine broke the silence, and I took off, speeding away from the lot. My heart was still pounding as I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see him still standing there, watching. And sure enough, I did. He was still there, his figure small in the distance, just standing in the parking lot, watching my car disappear into the night. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that something was wrong. Why had he been there for so long? Why hadn't he left? Was he waiting for me to leave before he did anything? Or was he simply waiting for something else to happen? I tried to push it out of my mind, but the thought stayed with me, gnawing at me. The next day, as I was getting my morning coffee before heading back to work, I overheard a conversation between two of the store managers. They were talking about the strange man who had been seen hanging around the store during closing shifts. They said he had been reported before, always appearing around the same time, always lingering around the employees, never buying anything, never doing anything illegal, but always unsettling. They couldn't figure out who he was or what he wanted. He didn't seem to be a regular customer, and they had never caught him doing anything suspicious enough to report to the police. But he was always there, always watching. They said it was like he was waiting for something, but no one could ever figure out what. As I stood there, listening, the pieces began to click into place. It was the same man. The man from the parking lot. The one who had been following me around the aisles the night before. I don't know what his intentions were, or if I was just another person he had been watching. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly avoided something that night. Something about him felt too deliberate, too focused. He wasn't just another late-night shopper. There was something more to it. Something I couldn't explain. I don't know if I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or if I was being targeted. But the next time I worked a closing shift, I kept an eye out, checking the aisles and the parking lot. And every time I saw someone standing still in the shadows, I couldn't help but wonder if it was him.